Welcome everyone to the Shure and Logitech Creating Unforgettable Collaboration Experiences webinar. My name is Chris Lyons with Shure, and we're here today to talk about unforgettable collaboration experiences. Just a couple of quick housekeeping notes. First of all, we are all doing this from home, just like most of you are, I expect. So we're all working from our basements, kitchen tables, and home offices. So please excuse any unfortunate technical glitches which might occur. Of course, that just makes it a little bit more exciting for everybody involved. We are recording today's webinar. So if you'd like to review it again later or have someone else at your organization listen to it, within a few days you should be getting a link in your email that will tell you how to access the recording of today's webinar. And also we will be taking questions probably at the end of the discussion. To ask questions, all you have to do is look at the upper right portion of your screen. You'll see a little string of icons up there. And one of them that's probably the second from the left looks like a little speech bubble with a question mark in it. If you click on that one, that will open the question pane and you can ask questions in there so that we can review them and make sure that I can ask our presenters the appropriate questions. So that just about takes care of our housekeeping stuff. Let's go ahead and begin to get started. Let's talk about first our two presenters today, our two experts. Paul Gunia from Shure is here, and you might have heard Paul speak before about Shure's many DSP and microphone options for video conferencing and presentation rooms. And we're also joined by Geno Zaharie from Logitech, who's going to be telling about some of the interesting solutions from Logitech's perspective. Let's go ahead to the next slide, Paul. The thing that we're going to be talking about today is how to get great collaboration experiences using video conferencing. I think most people will agree now that video conferencing has become much more than a nice to have feature in business today. It's become a must have, and many businesses are really relying on video conferencing to continue their operations. So whether it's for talking to customers or collaboration between team members to keep the business going, it's really become an essential piece of business today. So we're going to dive in a little deeper and talk about these solutions because we're always talking about, solutions for video conferencing or for meeting rooms or what have you. But, on the Shure side, we're accustomed to diving deeper into audio options, but we don't ever really talk about the video side of things. And Geno, lots of the people on the call today are the ones who at their organization are going to be charged with actually implementing a video collaboration solution and they're the ones who actually have to make it work. So let's start with you. Can you tell us more about what sort of pieces are we talking about? What's necessary to make the video side of great video collaboration work?
So at the core of our solution, of our collaboration, of what we've put together is the Logitech Nook, all right? And this Nook is doing two things. It's either running the Teams application or the Zoom Rooms application, all right? So we don't combine both apps onto one Nook. You're buying either the brain of the operation that will run Teams or run Zooms. It's two different SKUs, if you will. But this is the heartbeat of really the solution for these rooms we're going to discuss. It's built off of Windows IoT. You don't need to think about what's inside, how it runs, or how much RAM's in there. We've done all that guesswork for you with both Zoom and Microsoft. But people have always asked what's under the cover. So we do have, we've built this image, if you will, off of Windows IoT. And then we, of course, load the appropriate application in an image. But there's one key element there. It's called Display Link that speaks to our controller, which is going to be the next part of our conversation. But for the nuts and bolts, it's basically an 8th gen i7 core processor running either Zoom or Teams. That's all you really need to know. And if you notice on the back side of the Nook, we have one HDMI port and a USB-C port. So if you're going to be deploying a dual display environment, then you will need a USB-C to HDMI adapter for that second display. But the primary display is, of course, served by that first HDMI port. And then, of course, a host of USB ports for the peripherals we're going to talk about. So if you go to the next slide there, Paul. So back to the main discussion about once we have the computer locked down, now we need to have a UX or an interface in which you can engage with the either Teams application or the Zoom Rooms application. This is Logitech Tap, and Tap in a nutshell is really a touch display. There's no Android operating system running inside. There's no OS whatsoever. So through DisplayLink, we're able to plug in this Tap device to that host computer and deliver that native experience from either Teams or excuse me, Microsoft or Zoom for that UX, right, if you will. It's a 10.1 diagonal, has oleophobic coating on it, so it's not going to be smudgy. It's very, very clean. It has a beautiful resolution of 1280 by 800. But there are some key elements here when we made this device. One was an ultrasonic speaker. And an ultrasonic speaker emits a high frequency sound, right? And that was designed for Zoom because they have a process called direct share. So when I walk into a meeting room and I have my Zoom application running on my laptop, it's listening, right? And it's listening for that sound that's emitted from the ultrasonic speaker so that I can pair to it and now share my content wirelessly into the meeting, right? Or into the in-room displays. So that's a little node, if you will, that was developed for Zoom. Likewise, on the Microsoft side, we have an integrated motion sensor, right? So on the front panel, you can't quite see it. There's a little PR sensor, and it's just looking for a mouse wiggle. That's what it's emulating, and it will wake up the application, which wakes up the entire system, right? So there are hardware pieces embedded inside of Tap that these applications leverage, right? And it's for them. One that's universal is the HDMI capture card that's built in. So if I wasn't going to use direct share from Zoom or join a meeting, let's say in Teams, and share my content in as a participant, I can go ahead and plug my laptop in through this HDMI capture card, right? An HDMI cable we do provide. It allows me now to present my content in room or while I'm on one of those video collaboration calls. All right, go ahead and flip it. So, of course, integration or mounting the Tap is something we've thought a lot about. Besides the cable management internal to Tap, you probably saw those channels where our cables are loaded in, you can lock down. Well, we also now want to be able to mount this appropriately in the meeting space. So as accessories, we offer a table mount. There's a riser mount. If the table is very wide, I need to have it out in the center, but I need the angle changed so I don't have to stand up to look at what I'm touching. All right, we've thought about that, but they're beautiful mounts that are accessories that allow us to be mounted in a plethora of different ways that you can see in the image there. Now, with every Tap, right, comes a way to connect to the computer. All right, and we have a product called the Logitech Strong Cable Family, and in each box you'll get a 10-meter AOC cable. And AOC is just an active optical cable. The reason it's such high speed is because when I'm doing HDMI content, meaning I'm ingesting HDMI into the system, but I'm also presenting a UX and all the control that you have on that Tap interface, I could be using up some bandwidth, right? So this cable is 10 meters. There's a 25-meter option and a 45-meter option should you need longer lengths. Just know that it's plenum rated, it's ECA rated. You can route through walls, through conduit, but it's how that Tap device, right, as being just a touch screen, communicates back to the computer. So in a nutshell, it's just USB. So all in all, there's two base bundles that start us off, right, with both the control and, of course, the compute. Right, there's the Teams version or the Zoom Rooms version, and in the box you also get a PC mount to mount that PC either behind the display or in a credenza, and you want to mount it, and it has its own little cable retention capabilities as well, and of course our 10-meter cable. So these are what we call base or no AV bundles. Now to move beyond, right, we have our control, we have our compute. Now we need a camera. Right, we need a camera in the room that's going to be able to do the job. And now this camera is called the Logitech Rally camera. It's both certified with Teams as well as with Zoom. We go through a lot of legwork to make sure that it meets their spec from a color accuracy as well as the functionality that it needs to have in the room, such as pan tilt zoom. It has a 4K sensor built in to it, which give us all the plethora of resolutions you can imagine, right, based on the call speed and what those applications require. There's a 15x digital zoom, or optical and digital, so a total of 15. Has a 90-degree field of view, and also, of course, autofocus capabilities. One little key, and I'm not going to steal Paul's thunder here in a bit, but we call it video mute. So in most of these applications, you can hit a video mute button, which just puts up the mute sign, right, so no one can see people on the other end. There's a little indicator. You can see it in the images there on screen. You see that little white bar below the Logitech logo. When it's in call or it's streaming, delivering video, right, it will be white. If I mute, it goes black. So people in the room know that the camera's not hot, right? It's not live, especially if they're not sitting next to the controller, right, and sitting next to Cap. There's a standard tripod thread, 1/4-20, so you can mount this thing in a variety of ways. But we do provide a camera shelf. We provide even a little cubby that holds a power injector. So this camera does need power at its source. So if I'm going to mount it up or in between my displays, it does need a power source. We provide, of course, the power adapter, and we even give you the USB cable to go from the compute right to the camera, right? A 7-foot cable. Now, embedded in the camera, we actually enable what we call right light. And I think we've all seen it, where we walk into a room and there's a call that I'm on, and there's a big window behind me, and the sun always comes up at 7:30 in the morning, and it's shining directly into that light, into that camera lens, right? People on the other end are going to see you as like an FBI, you know, witness protection thing. Ideally, what we do is compensate for that light, right? We call it right light, and all we're doing is dithering down or feathering down that bright contrast, right, and bringing the subjects that are up front more in clarity. All that does is balances the light out, and that's just automatic with the product. One key thing I want to mention here is another part of the right suite, if you will. It's called right sight, and right sight is the ability to auto frame individuals when they're in the room, right? I think we've all seen it. The idea is we're going to frame those participants so that everyone is seen as best as possible, no matter where they're spread out in the room, right? It's really a cinematic experience of framing the appropriate individuals when needed. It's automatic, and we enable that through an application called Logitech Sync, all right? Logitech Sync is actually a separate application that I can download, right, from Logitech, which puts an agent on the computer, which then controls the camera, right? Either you enable it for on-call start or dynamic, which means it's happening all the time during a call, right? It's an option. But beyond that, we also do what we call device management. So that means that with right sight agent running, the sync agent running on the computer, there's a cloud option. So now, I'm not going to go into that because you can go to logitech.com and learn all about Logitech Sync. I'm able to have that agent report to a cloud. So now I can look at my entire estate of Rally cameras and be able to enable the right site application, or manage the device by pushing firmware down to the device, right? Because again, this is a USB camera attached to either the Teams or the Zoom Rooms environment. So more to come on Logitech Sync. Happy to answer more questions later, but it is key to the management of the cameras as well as the feature set. So there we have it, our base platform. Either we have it in the Zoom environment, right, or in the Teams environment with, of course, the Rally camera. And it could be multiple cameras if the applications support multiple cameras, like in the case of Zoom, for example. But now we need audio, right? And this is when we've turned to our good friends over at Shure to provide a really unique audio experience to deliver on the promise of great video in all spaces and all sizes.
All right, thank you very much, Geno. Thanks for going through your great line of products there. So
I'll turn it over to Chris and Paul.
Oh, can you guys hear me? This is Paul. Oops.
We can hear you. I don't know that Geno can hear us.
Oh yeah, sorry, Geno. I don't know what's going on there. We need to pay you a little visit to your house, spoof up for your home office a little bit with some better audio. But yeah, hey everybody, I'm Paul. Welcome to my kitchen. I'm still working out of my kitchen. Haven't set that home office yet because this is supposed to be temporary, right? We're all just temporarily at home. Yeah. So I'm here today to talk about our network systems ecosystem line of product that teams up very well with the Logitech gear. So what we've been focusing on over the past few years is really an ecosystem of audio, right? We've been known as the microphone guys for a very long time, but we wanted to branch out and provide more value to that conference room, right? So a few years ago, we came out with the MXA line of microphone arrays. We came out with the Microflex wireless system as well, right? IT-centric, all networked endpoints, no more analog connectors, really software network-driven products. We then came out with the INTELLIMIX P300, a simple yet powerful DSP, custom made for our microphones, really lets our microphones shine in medium to large, software codec rooms. It made using our microphones a hell of a lot easier. Then recently we came out with our network speaker, right? So now we have a microphone, we have DSP, we got speakers, And this all ties together beautifully, right? It ties together with a suite of software we call Designer. You can create projects, create locations, room templates, etc. We have a great feature called Optimize, right? So you can bring all your devices into a room, click one button, it routes the audio, sets up logic routing between the DSP and microphones for LED and mute sync, and it really sets you up quickly for a quick test call, right? We have presets basically in our DSP that are designed for the 310 or 910, depending upon the microphone in use. It'll set up different filters, it'll set up different auto mix parameters, etc. We also have encryption through our system, right? This is proprietary to Shure. No one else is doing this today, right? So you can encrypt the audio with AES-256 encryption from the microphone to the DSP, from the DSP to the speaker. You're either in that room or on that call, or else you're not hearing that audio. So we have a lot of flexibility with this system, right? You can steer around these lobes of audio, really making you, provide premium audio in any size room, in any configuration. All these products are certified, right? So that's key to this as well. These have all been through the rigorous testing of Microsoft and Zoom. The speaker right now is only Teams certified, but we're in the midst of that with Zoom. Shortly, you will see some more products being added to this list as well. But let's talk about the 910 real quick. I'm sure a lot of people know about it, but for the few that don't, it's our ceiling array microphone. It has 8 lobes of audio. You could steer around in 3-dimensional space. You could think of them as like flashlights of audio pickup. This is our most directional microphone we've ever made, right? And this really allows you to do a lot with how the room is used. So for example, you can really dictate where in the room audio coverage is picked up. So where are your conference participants, where are your presenters, where are your speakers? You want coverage there. You don't want coverage on the lunch buffet table. You don't want coverage on the door. You don't want coverage, in the hallway. So you can really dictate where you pick up people and where you don't. Similar to Geno's Logitech camera, we have an autofocus technology. It works a little differently. It does a few little different things. But what it does is it basically allows that lobe to move around by a foot or two, right? As people slouch in their chairs, they sit forward, they fiddle around a little bit. This autofocus technology will really maximize your signal to noise ratio. It has onboard DSP as well, right? So it has onboard echo cancellation, noise reduction, gain control, automatic mixing. There's a full DSP basically baked into this microphone. It's very powerful. It has the mute sync, it has encryption, all the things we talked about. So here's a little pictorial of what this looks like, right? So here is a medium-sized room, and here we're using narrow lobes. So this is, a narrow lobe, almost 1 lobe per participant. And this will sound amazing due to that directionality, right? So this will sound very similar to, for example, like a gooseneck 6 inches away from a person's mouth, right? So it's very directional audio. You can also have medium or wide lobes, and have a setup more similar to this, right? I'm sure everyone here is familiar with this type of setting, a classroom, a training room, a multi-purpose room. And this is where the 910 really shines. This is where our auto mixer technology really shines. So our auto mixer is one of the best in the whole industry. One of the key components of it is it only lets one channel open for one talker, meaning if I'm speaking in this room and 3 of those lobes are picking me up, it'll choose the best one, right? And that's key for that presenter in the front. So you can see on that presenter side, there are 3 lobes there covering that presenter, letting them roam around that front, the left, the right side of the whiteboard, etc. And then we use these wider lobes to cover broader sections of that audience, whether that's for Q&A, whether that's for discussion to a far end. You can really use the 910 in a myriad of ways, giving you a lot of flexibility, right? Any size room, any configuration, the 910 has you. As we already talked about, today's world's a little different, right? All the social distancing guidelines, everything kind of changing how we're working today. This larger space is turning more into a medium-sized space, right? And some of those medium-sized spaces can only fit the number of participants of a small room just a year ago. So when we're designing rooms today, we need to think about some of this flexibility. We need to think about how we're going to cover all the audio regions we need to in that room. And the MX910 was basically built to do that. Moving on to the 310, this is our table array microphone. So this has 4 lobes of pickup. You can steer them around in 360 degrees around the microphone. You could think of this as a very high-end, very customizable table microphone, right? So just like the 910, this is PoE powered. There's one cable routed to it for power, audio, and control. Each of those 4 lobes can be set differently as well. So you can set them to a different pattern if you wish, meaning they could be cardioid, omni, hypercardioid, bidirectional. You could really customize how these are placed on a table, where the coverage is, giving you maximum flexibility. So here's just a little top-down example of how you can steer around these lobes, how you can customize some of this coverage. It gives you, like I said, a lot of flexibility with what you're doing. Moving on to the DSP, the P300. This is a bit of my baby. I've been working on this product line for a long time. The whole mantra was simple yet powerful DSP. We wanted DSP that would make our microphone shine, that would let you get a test call up and running within minutes, but also gave you all the knobs and levers to tweak that you wanted to. Right, so you can just simply route audio, with the optimized feature, and you could get a test call up and running in a minute or 2, or you can go in there, tweak some filters, tweak AAC parameters, tweak the auto mixer to your heart's content, and really, squeeze every dB out of that room. We have that mute sync functionality, and the P300 is kind of the hub for that. It brings in all those signals and communicates with Teams and Zoom. So as this is Teams and Zoom certified, this is the only spot where DSP will happen, right? So when you plug that in to a USB port and you connect it to Teams or Zoom will disable all their echo cancellation, noise reduction, and gain control, and it's relying upon our DSP to do that now. So the P300 has USB, it has some analog I/O, has additional Dante I/O, really meant for that medium to large room. And we wanted to make it small, right? Making that form factor a half rack that was PoE plus powered was a key decision point for this whole product, right? We wanted you to have some flexibility. We didn't want you to have a rack in the room to have DSP anymore, right? So you can mount this behind a display. You could put it underneath a table. It's an extremely small, quiet design. So this is a little example of mute sync, right? So this simple yet very powerful feature basically eliminates a lot of those headaches around programming a control system to get this done for you, right? I was there, I've done this before, setting up, mute commands to certain places in the DSP, getting acknowledgements, setting timers, and then making sure LEDs change and synchronization. I've been there, and we didn't want to do that anymore. You don't have to do that anymore. We made it very simple. So this is programming free. You use our designer system to optimize the DSP with the microphone, and this works with all of our microphones. If there is a push button on the microphone, for example, the 310 has a button, you can control it all and sync it all from there. This will also work with our network mute buttons as well, which are just a simple, little push button that sits on the network. It's all working together, all within our great ecosystem. But how it works is you can hit mute from the Logitech Tap, for example. You can hit mute from the Teams interface from a 310, like I said. It'll send a command to the P300 over USB. It'll mute the automatic mixer, right? So that means no more audio from the near end is going to the call, so you're effectively muted there. And it'll show on the microphone, right? So everywhere there is a mute command or everywhere there is a mute indication, it all stays in sync, even to that far end, right? So when you're on a call, you could see that the other end is muted as well. Finally, we have our speaker. This is pretty new. So this is a PoE plus enabled ceiling speaker. It's a 5-inch design. It's obviously meant for speech and conference room applications. This is not meant for a stage or a PA. Don't even try it. We're not there. So it's very simple. It's in our software. When you apply PoE plus to it, you do get a little more drive strength out of it, which is great. And once again, this is our encrypted technology as well. So anywhere there's audio in our ecosystem, you can encrypt it and send it to a different endpoint. So here's a little just connection example, how you can get a 910 room kind of up and running quickly. So there's a little switch there. All our devices are PoE or PoE plus. They require this for Dante as well to exchange audio. Then you would connect the P300 over USB to the Teams or Zoom PC, and then HDMI to the display, obviously. And then with the Logitech gear, you simply add them over USB. So this is all standard cabling, nothing proprietary, very simple connection diagram to get your room up and running. Here's some more examples of what some rooms could look like, right? So as I said, the P300 is 8 channels of processing, and it really gives you, some options there in how you build out your room. So you can think of our microphones or our speakers as little building blocks to build out what kind of room and what kind of requirements are needed there. So here's a small room. You could easily cover this with one 310, and you have the P300 in there. You have a single MXN5 speaker, and then you have the Logitech gear in there, right? You have the Logitech tab on the table for control, and you see both a power and a strong USB in there. Then you have the Rally Cam, and then you have the PC provided by Logitech as well. If you have a bit of a bigger space, you can append this with the second 310, right? So you have those 8 channels of audio on the P300, use them as you want. You could use 4 channels out of each of these 2 310s if you wish, or you could start using 910s, right? So you can use all 8 lobes out of a 910 if you want in a bigger space. Or if you keep on growing, have 2 910s, but for example, only use 4 lobes out of each. If you need to use 5 and 3, 6 and 2, do whatever you want, just as long as it adds up to 8. So this really shows you how simple it is using our building blocks of technology, using our building block products to scale rooms up, right? From small, medium, large to training room. You could use the same suite of products to cover every room in the enterprise. So that's really what we're here to talk to you about, right? So that kind of sums it up. You have your best in breed Logitech video tools, the Rally Cam, the Logitech Tap. Then you have our best in breed audio, our 910, our 310, our P300 and speakers. All this comes together in packages for Teams or Zoom. It really makes your life a lot easier, and all these are ready to deploy today.
That's
Paul,
great.
Yeah, no, and to Paul's point, right? All of the various components from both manufacturers, right, are this, the certified word that we use. We don't use loosely. I know Shure doesn't either, right? We have to go through quite a few hoops to make this all a vetted system, if you will. So we've taken that guesswork out, as Paul said, from the whole solution set, and they're providing really an on-ramp, right, for kind of mass deployment of these certified vetted solutions from both companies. So
yeah, that's a great point, Geno. This was not easy to do. If anyone's been through this process, it's pages on pages of dBs of noise reduction and gain control and double talk performance from the audio side. And like you were mentioning earlier, all the exact color chroma and video aspects that you guys had to hit. So Microsoft and Zoom does a very good job of ensuring quality. And I think that's also a good descriptor of what these two companies can bring together.
I agree. And I apologize, I couldn't hear any questions, or Chris, if you were asking earlier. I think we made it through the technical hurdles there, but I'm back. So
you're back, Geno. You're back, and
I'm back, feeling good.
And that's what's important. So one of the other questions people might be asking is, how do they get it? Right. I think that's a key point. I think we showed a lot of value, and at least I'm interested in buying one. And it's really simple. You talk to your dealer today. So this is all being sold through our AV integration channel, through your local Shure reseller. Go talk to them, and they could package up something for you.
Yeah, in fact, good call on that, Paul. It's funny, we share really a like-minded group of AV integrator resellers, right? So there should be no problem for end users that are on the call to reach out to their favorite reseller, and that reseller will then go to the various sources to bring these components together. And the cool part under from Logitech, right, we're talking about 2 part numbers, right? The base AV bundle that we mentioned earlier and the Rally camera, and then of course, pick the appropriate Shure components based on the room size, and really that's just made it easy for everybody.
That's the key,
And believe it or not, we actually do have several questions, and one of them is about availability. So let's start with that one. Geno, someone asked, are these products all available in Portugal? I know that Shure has a distributor in Portugal, although I don't know the name off the top of my head. Is it also the case for Logitech in Portugal?
Yeah. Maybe I can respond to that once I learn of the distributors that will be carrying the camera in the base bundle to make sure that that source is available to that person who's asking that question. But absolutely, yes.
That's
in Portugal.
Great.
Yeah.
So just a reminder before I start diving into questions here, if you want to ask a question, submit one, you just go to the little icons in the upper right part of your screen. The second icon from the left looks like a little speech bubble with a question mark in it. You should open up and you'll see a window that's called Live Event Q&A, and you just type in your question, and I'll see it here, and we'll get our presenters to answer it. So let's see here. Here's one for Geno also. Does the Zoom version Nook get updates via Zoom or from Logitech? How does that work?
Yeah, so you can roll the Nook, right, any Windows PC into ZDM, and you can manage your Windows updates from Zoom directly, right? So the only thing that we're going to be doing with the Sync application, when I brought that up earlier, is managing the firmware on the Rally camera. And one thing I should note, we're also monitoring the P300. There's a difference between monitoring and managing. Monitoring is just letting the source agent know that the P300 is connected. It has a green dot. Managed means I want to push firmware to the device, right? And we can do that through our Sync environment. So you will be managing your Windows environment through Zoom's ZDM efforts, right, under the Windows device management side of their platform.
Okie doke. Let's see, several more here. Can the tap control display on off via CEC, etc.? So I guess we want to know, can the tap turn the screen on and off?
So again, we're emulating or delivering the native application for both Zoom and Teams, right? So depending on the displays that you have through CEC, there are adapters, or Extron makes, Crestron. There's a lot of different providers out there that do make CEC control based on what the Nook's capabilities are. And Nook, it does not have the ability to have native CEC embedded in it. So you will be using a third party for that screen on and off. Zoom approach is a little bit different, where you can put the application in kind of a standby or in a standby state, which all it's doing is emulating black to the screen. So I set a timeline, I walk into the room, and at 8 o'clock hits, and now everything kind of wakes up. That's based on Zoom's effort to do that. With Microsoft, you're using CEC controllers if you want to have that kind of motion sensor when you walk into the room and I want the screens to be enabled. So, got it.
Let's see, here's one for Paul. In the newest release of Designer, which is the software Shure uses to configure all the Microflex advanced microphones and processors and so forth, in the newest release of Designer, I've noticed the MXA310 is not an available device in the coverage map. Was this left out for a reason? Can we get this added as a device in the future?
That is a great question and something on our roadmap. So yes, we know that the 310 is not yet in that page. You have to go to that we call it an SDC, the device controller inside that. So you would have to go to that 310 specific UI inside Designer to do that today. We are working on bringing in more features into Designer. Every quarter we have updates, and that's on our list. So we think it's a great idea and something we're going to get around to, hopefully sooner rather than later.
And speaking of microphones, someone is just noting you didn't mention the MXA 710. I don't know if, I know your slides were kind of focused on the 910, but that's also another microphone option for people who are looking for a great room microphone.
Right, and that's important to note here, Chris, in that currently the MXA 710 is not Microsoft Teams certified. So what we're really focusing on is certified solutions here. As I mentioned, there are going to be more products added to our certified suite very shortly. That is in the works, and we should be able to announce something soon.
That's great. Yeah, and that's one of the things is that even though the product may be available, we still have to go through the testing and verification steps to make sure it really works, so that nobody's doing any experimenting in the field. Once we say it's certified, it works. Here's a question for Geno here. Do the Logitech MTR and ZR systems support dual monitors? If so, how's that managed? I believe the Nook only has a single HDMI output and the USB-C would connect to the tap. Thanks.
Yeah, great question. Actually, I think on the back side of the Nook, we showed, I think it's 2 USB 3.0 ports, and on the front side, you have a 2.0 and a 3.0, and the USB-C port. So HDMI out to primary monitor 1, USB-C out with an HDMI adapter to the second monitor, and the tap is going to connect over the USB-A connection to any one of those available USB ports. So we do support dual monitors for both Teams and Zoom, but the tap is going to connect to one of the open A ports, where that C port is going to be used for the output, right? Just using an HDMI to USB-C adapter. So good question. Yeah.
Here's another good question. I love these sorts of things because it reminds me that customers are always thinking about, how can I do this? Can I try this? The question is, I have a 3-way divisible room with Logitech Tap for Teams in each space. Any way to switch rally cameras to different Tap Nooks in a certified fashion? How would you handle that, Geno?
Well, yeah, that's a good one. Yeah, because we're enumerating with the host PC running that instance of Teams or in case Zoom, that camera is mapped to that platform. So, we'd have to look at an alternative camera source that's maybe network connected that can be routed. But in this sense, unless I had a smart switch and I want to switch myself around and make that camera available to multiple sources, I'm really relying on it terminating into that host PC, right? That's running that instance of Teams, right? Or Zoom. But let me make a note of that. There's probably a better answer out there, some whiz-bang way to do that, but certainly, yeah.
And that's probably also a great place to put in a plug for the award-winning technical support departments at both Logitech and Shure, who are just love questions like that. They know what the product can do on the spec sheet, and it's when somebody wants to do something a little bit custom or something like that it really gets interesting for all of the tech support staff. Here's a really good question. I really like this one because it's very timely. Due to the nature of COVID and people not wanting to touch things, is there a QR reader where someone could start their meeting through the tap, basically without touching it, just by scanning something? Is that possible?
Yeah. Well, anything's possible. Yeah, it's again, because we're displaying the native application from either Teams or Zoom, that question is best suited for those platforms, right? So I think the magic of possibly I have a mobile application of Teams or Zoom, and I want to be able to control the environment that I'm in. That's kind of the holy grail of not touching anything in the room. We do have integration with voice platforms, right? With Alexa for Business for being able to say start my meeting and the call will start. But to do a barcode or a scan of some sort, unfortunately, that's on the platform providers themselves to develop a way to interface with their applications, without touching anything.
Great. We've had a couple questions about whether this webinar has been recorded or is being recorded. Yes, it is. You'll get an email since you're a registered attendee. You'll get an email in a few days letting you know how to access that recording. Someone contributed that Shure's distributor in Portugal is EarPro at www.earpro.es if you'd like to visit them. Let's see, there was another interesting question here. Here we go. Does Logitech have a remote management platform for running IoT updates when boots on the ground aren't an option? Is there a way to remotely manage this, Geno?
Well, if you're using the Microsoft tool set to manage your fleet of PCs from an OS level, then you would leverage those. In the world of Zoom, I mentioned it earlier, you can enroll the PC into Zoom's device management platform for Windows updates. So if the question is, how do I remotely update the Teams room system or the Zoom room systems, right? You'll be using their platforms to upload, right, the appropriate firmware or software to that compute source. Is the best way I can describe it. In one sense, we're pretty invisible, right? We're basically offering RAM, GPU speed, processing speed to run their applications. Their applications themselves are being supported by their own discrete platforms. And that's where the line in the sand is. It's kind of the only extra piece that we're putting onto the Nook itself is sync for the management of our peripherals, which is one extra application. If you look at tap, one other way, for example, where we might interface with Windows is with tap. If I want to invert the image, meaning I want to wall mount my tap and now have the image, flipped, I do that in the world of display properties, right, with Windows. Right, I just go in there and I go and invert the image itself, just like if I'm going to extend my display. So that's where the Windows and our peripherals kind of cross over. But in essence, I want to leverage the platform itself for the full device management of the compute itself, or of the firmware or the software that's going to be running on supporting those apps from them. So.
Great. Okay.
Yeah.
Here's a question for Paul. Can you explain if INTELLIMIX Room can be used with Logitech Tap, and what are the benefits of using it versus the P300? That's an interesting question.
That is a great question, and yeah, we could have a whole hour discussion on that probably. So INTELLIMIX Room was really designed for these types of applications, right? Right now, we might want to pause some of this in terms of recommending the solution because of Teams and Zoom certification. We're kind of waiting on those guys. It will definitely work. We have these taps in our lab. It works amazingly well, actually. So INTELLIMIX Room was really meant to, lower the cost and complexity of Shure audio rooms, right? When you're using a 910, using a 310, using INTELLIMIX Room on that same PC allows you to eliminate either USB extenders, additional hardware failures, etc. It's a very kind of forward-looking product. So we're waiting for Teams certification, we're waiting on Zoom certification to really start pushing that type of solution. But we have had some customers already deploy it at scale, and it's been very successful. So for example, we had a large university. They came to us, they were looking at doing 110 rooms. They said during the summer break, we want to outfit 110 rooms with audio within a traditional hardware DSP. They saw INTELLIMIX Room, fell in love with it. They're doing everything more IT focused, more network focused. And because of the price point of INTELLIMIX Room, they moved that from 110 rooms to over 220 using MXA 710s and MXA 910s. Right, so it really lowers the cost of every room, allows you to get more premium audio into more rooms. Obviously resulting in a better experience for your end users. So it is, kind of laser focused at these types of installs, these types of applications, but we need to wait a little bit for team certification to really start pushing that message.
Got it. And while I have you, Paul, here's another question. Does the new Shure MXA mute switch also sync with this hybrid setup? Can you use the mute button with this?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, the MXA mute button is a complete part of this ecosystem. It's meant to, kind of be just that networked endpoint that lets you mute. So that can mute the MXA 910, the MXA 710, the MXA 310. It'll show up and sync mutes with the Logitech Tap or Microsoft Teams or Zoom. It's just a part of the whole ecosystem. It's another control point, another option for you to use to control.
Great.
Yeah, I was gonna add to that just on video mute and audio mute, right? This HID-PID recognition of device and software, right? That's where it happens. So, and to Paul's point, yeah, it works across everything. Once that integration is complete and vetted and certified, then you do have that kind of physical device mute as well as the software mute. And Paul, you mentioned it earlier, being able to see on the controller itself and those on the other end even see that the room's been muted because someone actually touched a physical button or touched the soft button on tap, right? We're just basically interfacing with that, with that soft client, if you will. So,
Geno, don't go away. Speaking of tap control, someone asked, I'm a bit newish to Microsoft Teams rooms. Can the Rally Camera PTZ functions be controlled via the Tap Teams room interface?
So that's on Teams, right? Zoom, of course, has full PTZ control, zoom in and zoom out. With every Rally camera, you're given a remote control to do that. So Intel Teams allows for remote, or excuse me, near full camera control. That's something that is on that application again, right? So in the case of our remote control, that's how we're managing it. If there's a third-party plugin or widget that will enable pan-tilt zoom control, that's Microsoft vetted, then you could use that. So again, I usually default back to kind of the platforms because really, there's really no secret or magic sauce for sprinkling on top besides providing those little widgets like the electronic speaker, the HDMI capture card, the proximity sensor, things that those platforms can leverage. And for them to enhance their experiences, if their customers demand pan-tilt zoom control of cameras or multiple cameras, that would be native to the application that we're just going to display. So
got it.
That's helpful.
Here's another question. Can two Rally cameras be connected to a single Nook and be switched between using the tap interface? So if you've got, a slightly larger room maybe, or you just want to be able to have two different shots, like a wide shot and a close-up or something, how does that work?
Yeah, so and I can speak to the Zoom side because I'm pretty familiar with their Zoom. I think there's a limit of 8 or it could be more cameras that could actually be attached. Similar to the desktop app that I use, right? You're able to pick between multiple cameras. So they do allow a camera switching and a drop down if there's more than 2. On the Team side, I don't have that answer. But again, you're going to be using the native application, those applications to see different peripherals that might be connected that you want to display or share or switch to. If needed. So I should know that answer for the Team side. I just don't. I apologize. Yeah.
No, that's great. Paul, here's one for you. Is there any way to remotely control Shure devices through the network? That would make it easy for large corporations that have IT teams managing all the devices in the building. What about that?
Yeah, so we have a few different ways to do that. So for one, our designer software is all network based. So if you are on the same network as those devices, you can discover, you can configure, you could change every single parameter of that device. We have a remote monitor and management tool called System On, and this is really meant to be that kind of help desk type tool, letting you see when devices are online, if they fall offline. You can remotely mute, change some very high level settings. It's not the same as designer. You can't go in and tweak everything you want, but you can do some basic troubleshooting over the network. It's very cool. And the third way is we have some basic TCP/IP control strings. So all these devices live on the network. You could telnet some commands to them, some kind of ASCII strings, and that's kind of how you would traditionally do mute sync, how you would do some muting and LED control. You could change a lot of parameters on there, and you could easily just kind of ping the device, see if it's there. You could do a myriad of things. So we have these API documents on our website. If you go to shure.com/MXA, you can click in, see some details about each of the microphones, and there's a control strings document on there which details those APIs.
Okay, great. And Paul, another one for you. You mentioned that two 910s are still limited to 8 lobes, or maybe he says the 910 is still limited to 8 lobes. Is that a limitation of the DSP? Do you have a more powerful DSP that can do larger systems, or would we need to go to a third party? So, you talked about some room layout diagrams. What about where you want to scale it up a bit and you're going to you need many more than 8 lobes, maybe you need 16 or 24 or something like that?
Yeah, that's a great question. And this kind of talks to our INTELLIMIX DSP strategy. So what we wanted to do was provide a kind of distributed approach and give you options, make it flexible for what you wanted to do in the room and how you wanted to deploy things. So we first came out with our hardware DSP, our P300, and this had 8 channels of audio, our own algorithms for echo cancellation, noise reduction, automatic mixing. We built all that in-house. Our engineers can still go in there, pop open the hood and tweak it if we want to, right? We didn't contract any of that out. It's not just on a little chip from a vendor. So all that is proprietary algorithms. So we first had it in a hardware base. We then tried to make it portable, right? So then we transferred all those same algorithms over to the microphone side. So that was when we added AEC and noise reduction to the 910. So think about how you can start scaling up some of this now. So if you have 8 lobes of the 910, all doing its own AAC, you can now feed one of those channels into the P300, right? So now you can have, in effect, up to 8 of those 910s into one P300. We, for right now, only recommend 4. If you're doing more than 4, please talk to us beforehand, as things might get a little hairy, but it should work. And then after we put DSP onto the microphones, we made it even more portable by making software, right? So that's that INTELLIMIX Room product I was talking about before. It's a complete software-based version of our DSP that runs on Windows. You can get that in 8 or 16 channel variants. So that would be our 16 channel per channel echo cancellation product. You can get DSP in the microphones themselves and then route those to a P300, and then the P300 is 8 channels there as well. So that's, I talk about the flexibility. I talk about the building blocks of technology. I talk about how you can, really fit these into what you're trying to do inside a room. And these are just some of the options we're presenting to you.
Great. Okay, so here's a question for Geno. Will the Logitech Sync software be able to monitor the Shure DSP and hardware? And when will Sync allow the ability to monitor dual Logitech cameras in a room?
Okay, yeah, so today we monitor the P300, so we're not managing it as far as taking Shure's latest and greatest P300 firmware and pushing it down to its device, but we will monitor its connection to the NUC, right? In a sense, we're reading the USB tree from the NUC itself and telling it that the camera's connected, and so is this audio DSP. The ability to manage multiple cameras, or let's say 2 cameras through Sync is possible. Maybe the question is, can I enable right sight on both cameras, right? Can the right sight service that's running on that Sync agent on that computer be able to manipulate the auto capability? Right now it's not to one camera, but I do have the ability to see multiple cameras in Sync. A great example is this laptop I'm using. I have a Rally camera in here that's above me, and I have my Brio webcam that you see me on. I'm able to manage both my devices from the instance of Sync that's running on my laptop. So I think it's maybe the question's more towards, can I enable right side on both those cameras and have that functionality? Right now it's for one camera. So.
And speaking of the camera, would Logitech Rally camera work with a USB 2.0 extender? If so, what's the recommended device?
Yeah, there are a lot of extenders out there. We have a partnership with, of course, Icron. They make a really nice extender, as well as sound control technologies for 2.0. And again, at those speeds, we're looking at 1080p, right? So, when you want to get into the 4K feeds, that's when we're looking at, a 3.0 extender. So I'll leave it there, but there are a lot of different extenders, and you can extend over category or fiber, right, depending on the solution set. I must give a plug though. The USB strong cable is a nice option because again, that's a 3.2 cable. It can transmit some pretty high speeds, even though you're going to need power at the source. And as we know, Rally camera has a wall wart and a little barrel jack connector to give its power. Let that USB and fiber solution work and go from there.
Yeah, Geno, I actually love that solution, that strong cable. When you first showed that to me, I was really impressed with it. And I think the huge thing for me is that it eliminates variables, right? It eliminates another piece of gear. It eliminates another connection point. It's a recommended cable. It's a known good solution. If you can use that cable, I don't know why you wouldn't. Why add more variance into your room designs? I don't know.
Well, yeah, everyone has their, the kind of extra extenders left over, but yeah, feel free to give it a shot. I think we do on our website and in our forums, and of course our support site, do some recommendations of things we've kind of tested, but we usually rely on our partners to test their solutions out and then publish outbound. So, yep.
I got a couple of quick questions for Paul, I think. Does the mute sync functionality apply for both mic mute and far end audio, or only for the mic mute?
Okay, so that mute will mute the microphones in the room you're in. You will still get the far end audio over your speakers, right? So when you're pressing that mute, you're muting the microphones that you're using, but the far end will get notification of that, which is key, right? So here in my room, if I hit mute, you would be able to see on your end that I am muted. But It does not mute the speaker in your rooms, right? So you would still be able to hear the participants on the other end. They would not be able to hear you.
Got it. And here's a question. I'm almost surprised it didn't come up until now, because we haven't really talked a whole lot about security. Once all devices are IP devices, how safe is the audio when it's on the corporate network? And that's something that a lot of organizations are very concerned about.
I didn't talk about encryption. I thought I talked about encryption, but I can talk about it again. I can talk about this for days. So we have full AES 256 encryption over our Dante links, right? And we're the only company that does this. Nobody else is doing this today. It's proprietary to Shure. So between the microphones and DSP, you can encrypt all that audio. Between our INTELLIMIX DSP and the speaker, you can encrypt all that audio. So there really is no way to do it, to tap into that audio, unless you are in that room or you're on the call. You're not going to hear it. AES 256 is, very standard within the industry, and we're pretty proud of being able to, lock down our audio that cleanly, that securely.
Great. And here's one more for you, Paul. Does System On need to be part of the certified conversation, or is it fine because it doesn't interact with the platforms, but rather a ICT-based management tool?
Yeah,
and I'm not sure what he means by ICT. Maybe you know.
I know IT was that
maybe
a typo?
Maybe it's just a typo.
It means IT-based. I'm not sure what the C is either. But no, it does not need to be certified because it's simply controlling our devices. If there was something interacting with the team service, the Zoom service, either on the audio or control plane or the video plane or the display plane, then it needs to get certified. But if you're just controlling our devices, you won't need to get that certified, right? So Geno, for example, Sync doesn't have anything to do with Microsoft Teams or Zoom certification, does it?
Nope. Only in that we just make sure that they are aware that this lightweight little agent, if you will be residing on the computer itself, right? Similar to possibly the INTELLIMIX Room software and the certification we're going through on the, what we're going to be layering on top of their application that's using the, the NUC horsepower, if you will, or any compute source. So.
And we're running out of time, but I want to throw in one more question here because this is an interesting one, I think. Do we have to follow a certified bundle, which is what we've been talking about today, or can we mix and match our own components as long as they're all certified? I'm not sure who needs to answer that question.
Maybe I'll take a first stab at it. We really, from the NUC itself, right? And I've said this 100 times now, right? It's running a single application. It's running the designed application for how it was built, right? And even our tap, the way it connects in, we're represented by a single IP address on the network with the tap and the computer, right? We're taking up one of those network PIDs, if you will. So when we can combine our solution with, let's say, Shure Audio, right, we're making sure that both Zoom and Microsoft feel very comfortable in the configuration so that we have a vetted, supported design. And I think that's, Chris, you brought it up earlier as far as, we have great support teams that do work together. So these are things in our labs that we're testing and we're vetting and we're sharing our results, of course, with Microsoft. And now we can go out and talk about these things as solution and options for our customers. So for us, it comes down to a kind of really supportability standpoint, and that there's not a lot of science projects out in the world where our teams aren't aware of maybe these unique configurations, but we do know they exist, right? And we're willing to talk about those, but it's really more about the supportability from Logitech. So
yeah, and that's I think you nailed it right there, Geno, in terms of a known, vetted, supported solution. Being able to say, right, this is exactly the specification that Microsoft has on their website. This is what I installed in my room, and if you have issues, you can talk to them or us or your integrator. It makes it a lot easier. If you start doing some more customized stuff, you start doing more, out of the box ideas, that's going to be a bit harder to support all around. So it really comes down to that support question, Chris.
All right. Well, I think we're just about out of time, so I think that's a great place to end it. Obviously, get in touch with your local Logitech or Shure representative if you've got questions on your specific needs at your organization. We'd love to hear it. We'd love to help out. Or you can visit the Logitech website and or the Shure website to find out more, both about these bundles as well as the individual products that we've been talking about. And I'd like to thank Geno Zaharie from Logitech and Paul Gunia from Shure for taking the time today to participate, and Pete Herr, who's been the one down in the basement pedaling the machine to keep this thing going all this time. And thank you very much, everybody, for joining us for Shure and Logitech creating unforgettable collaboration experiences. Thank you very much.